No matter how good you are, tennis players are bound to have a quote-unquote flop season where they don't perform as well as they did in years prior, whether it be due to injury or lack of form and confidence. I compiled a list of 10 ATP men's tennis players who finished 2023 ranked inside the top 50 but had a notable decline in form in 2024. Some of these guys you probably know very well, and others you might know a little bit of but forgot they existed because they didn't do much notable on the tour this year. Giving the same disclaimer as I did for my top 10 women's flops video, I'm not making this video to bash these players. It's for entertainment purposes, but more importantly, educational purposes, to delve into what went wrong for these players and why we didn't see as much of them this year. Hi, I'm Christian Basnight, and welcome to Christian's Court, where I cover tennis from all angles. If you have not yet already, make sure you subscribe and click that notification bell so you join Christian's crew and so you're notified whenever I post more countdown videos like this. I have a lot planned coming for the next month or so you don't want to miss out. Now, starting us off at number 10 is Dane Holger Rune. Rune ended 2023 as the number 8 player in the world, and he attained a career high of number 4 of that summer, thanks to winning the 2022 Paris 1000 Masters. Plus, he made the finals of both Monte Carlo and Rome. In 2024, however, Holger made a lonely final at the Brisbane 250, and he finished number 13 in the world. Now, this was Rune's best win percentage season that he has had in his career thus far, but results-wise, I feel like Rune has kind of been on a little bit of a decline, and I'm putting him on this list because, to be honest, he didn't meet a lot of people's expectations, and I am a little bit harder on him because I feel like he should have improved more than he has thus far. Now, this wasn't a bad season from Holger, and perhaps flop is a bit too harsh of a word to describe his season, which I was nice in putting him at number 10. However, I do think it was pretty underwhelming. There's quite a bit of chatter about whether Holger would be able to finally make a big mark at the majors this season, especially after he formed a super team of coaches at the end of 2023 comprised of Hall of Famer Boris Becker and Severin Luthi, who formerly worked with Roger Federer. However, soon after Rune's second round loss at the Australian Open, both Luthi and Becker announced that they left the Danes team. Rune also suffered an early exit at the US Open falling in the first round, and his best result at the Slams came at Roland Garros, where he was close to beating the eventual finalist Alexander Zverev in the 4th round, but he lost in a close 5-set thriller. I think that was a really big missed opportunity for Holger, in my opinion, as that could have been his first Slam final right there. Rune had a 3-10 record against top 20 players compared to a slightly better 7-2 record last season. Rune suffered some pretty bizarre losses this year. He got beat 6-1, 6-1 by Fabio Merazan at Miami, and he also failed to defend his Munich title when he was thrashed 2-0 by Jan-Lennart Struff in the semifinals. Rune claimed he was sick in both cases, but he also only managed 3 games against Taylor Fritz in their Shanghai round of 16 match, and Holger, he looked pretty fine there. Rune did finish strong at the Paris Masters, though, his final tournament of the season, where he made the semifinals playing pretty solid tennis, so perhaps that is a good omen for his 2025 season. However, I still am a bit wary for Holger's 2025 prospects and him finally rising to that potential in the Slams. The 21-year-old doesn't seem to have a stable foundation with him, as he switched coaches every so often. It's a common trend with him. Holger seems to have like this immediate, results-oriented mentality instead of it being more process-oriented and thinking more about the long term. He worked with Patrick Mouratoglou on and off quite a few times, and of course I already mentioned he worked with Boris Becker and Severin Luthi, and now he is back with Lars Christensen, who he was coached by in the past. Concerning Holger's game, I think that Jim Courier on the Tennis Channel, he said it best when he said that Rune has no true strategy or game plan out there when he competes. He acknowledged that Holger has the tools for success, but he said that the Dane has a very immature game and needs a sense of order. I do agree with Jim and believe that Holger again needs a more solid foundation and team behind him aimed at attaining long-term success rather than those immediate results. Like, it seems like Holger wants a Slam now. He wants a 1000 title now. Some have also said that Holger's mom, Anneke, if I'm pronouncing that right, by the way, Mrs. Rune, said that she could be holding him back. And while I think that that might be the case, it ultimately just comes down to Rune making the decisions himself that would better his career. Again, as a fan of his, I want Rune to capitalize and maximize his potential. And it is crazy to think that he was once more accomplished than Sinner about a year and a half ago. And now look at how the tables have turned. At only 21 years old again, Rune still has time to turn things around, much like Jannik did this season. And I hope that he does his big one next year, because I think that's what the tour needs. You know, a little bit of a younger big three with him, Carlos, and Jannik. Now at number 9 is Brit Cam Norrie, who finishes the season ranked outside the top 40 for the first time since 2020. Norrie has honestly kind of been on a steady, slow decline since 2021 when he won Indian Wells, his biggest career title to date. The following year, he cracked the top 10 and made his first Slam semifinal at Wimbledon. 2023 wasn't as successful for Norrie as his two predecessors, but Cam still managed to win Acapulco, the 500 there, beating Alcaraz in the final. The Brit didn't do really that much in 2024, to be honest, which is why he's close to being pushed outside the top 50. Norrie started the season strong in Australia, making the second week for the first time in Melbourne, and he ultimately lost to Alexander Zverev 7-6 in the 5th in the round of 16. Norrie was hurt, though, by not having that big standout strong result to keep him inside the top 20 for the 4th consecutive season. The Brit was also physically hurt too, as a forearm injury forced him to miss the entire North American summer hardcourt swing. It took Cam some time to find his footing, but the lefty did finish his season strong with a final showing and Mets the 250 there. Injuries aside, though, the Brit did show some subpar form this season, and notably he suffered a loss to the world number 773rd Jack Pennington Jones in the Nottingham Challenger, which is one of his recent worst losses of his career. I will give him a little bit of slack because, again, he did have to miss a decent chunk of the season, but I am skeptical of whether Cam has what it takes to be a consistent top 15 player again. Now, my number 8 might seem crazy because it's Daniil Medvedev, and it might seem crazy to put him on this list considering that he ended the year ranked inside the top 5, only dropping down 2 ranking points. But true fans of his know that this has been Medi's least successful season since 2018, which is why he is number 8 here. Not only was this Medvedev's worst season win percentage wise since that 2018 season, but 2024 was also the first season that Medi went titleless since 2017. Daniil also had a rather disappointing 6-9 record against top 10 players this year compared to when he went 12-9 in 2023. With Daniil, it's very simple to see why he wasn't as successful this year compared to recent years past. He had a very strong start at the start of the season, making finals of the first 2 big tournaments of the season, the Australian Open and Indian Wells. However, he lost those championship matches to Jannik and Carlos Alcaraz respectively, who were arguably Medvedev's biggest Achilles heel opponent-wise this year. First, Daniil relived some PTSD at the Australian Open final against Jannik as he suffered yet another loss after being 2 sets to love up in the championship, like in 2022 against Rafa. Jannik beat Daniil 5 times this season, which you can argue costed him around 3 big titles. The one time that Daniil did take down Jannik, which was at the Wimbledon quarterfinal, he was bounced by Alcaraz the very next round in the semifinal, and the Spaniard, he beat Daniil all 3 times that they played this year. In addition to dealing with a nagging shoulder problem for much of the season, Daniil has been vocally unsatisfied with the tennis balls the tour has used. Medi says the tour started using cheaper manufactured balls since COVID, which are slower and thus favors the more powerful hitters, he says, like a Sinner or an Alcaraz. Daniil's opening round-robin match at the ATP Finals against Taylor Fritz was a visual display of the Russians' on-court frustrations, as he low-key kind of acted a fool out there and just mentally checked out. Daniil was honest, though, and said that 2024 was a rough year for him, and said that he was looking forward to being done and going into the offseason. I believe that heartbreaking Australian Open loss, the bum shoulder, the balls, and the Jannik/Carlos dominance just played on Medvedev in his mind mentally. I think perhaps having a little bit of an extended offseason would do him well, but perhaps, too, more drastic changes are required, like a coaching change. What do y'all think, by the way? Should Daniil perhaps part ways with his longtime coach, Joe Servata? Let me know in the comments. Regardless of whether he lets Servata go or not, I think having another voice in his box would be a great idea. And especially Daniil, he's now 28 years old and he is closer to entering more in the twilight of his career. Now, like Daniil, my number 7, Aslan Karatsev, is making his second appearance on this type of flop list, as I made a similar video back in 2022 where both Russians were on the list. Karatsev had the biggest rankings drop here on this list, falling 256 spots. Karatsev had a big breakout moment at the 2021 Australian Open when he reached the semifinals as a qualifier. He had some strong results soon after that, like when he won the Dubai 500, and he finished that year ranked 15th in the world. 2022 was definitely a sophomore slump for the Russian, as his ranking slipped outside the top 50 by the year's end. However, Karatsev did get back on track a little bit in 2023, and he finished the year 35th thanks to runs like at the semifinals of Madrid, the 1000 there, and he finished runner-up at the Tokyo 500. Unfortunately, Aslan's 2024 season got off to a very rough start as he fell in his first match of the season in Brisbane against Jason Kubler. Karatsev was sidelined for about 4 months, needing knee surgery, and when he returned, the Russian earned just one top 50 win due to him losing in the opening rounds of practically every tournament that he entered. I know Aslan is already a streaky player as he has a very high-risk game, so he likely would have had a little bit of a dip in form regardless of an injury. However, that injury definitely did not make life easy for him, so I will cut him a little bit of slack here. When I found out that he was close to being outside the top 300, I was shocked because he has a lot of talent and he really should be a top 50 mainstay. The climb back inside the top 100, it might be challenging for Karatsev, but I think he has the game to do so in 2025. Next is Spain's Alejandro Davidovich Falcao, who fell 36 spots to number 62 in the world as of me recording this video. Davidovich Falcao did not have a great win-loss record at 19 and 22. The 25-year-old is a very quick, explosive, aggressive, overall solid baseliner player. I think of him as a solid top 30 mainstay player who is bound to have at least one solid standout result per year. In 2021, he had a big breakout result, making the Roland Garros quarterfinals, and then his bigger breakout result came at the 2022 Monte Carlo Masters, where he defeated Djokovic en route to his maiden 1000 final. In 2023, Alejandro scored a couple more top 10 wins and a 1000 semifinal in Canada, which earned him that career high of number 21 in the summer of that year. Alejandro is also unfortunately famous for that infamous underarm serve against Rune at Wimbledon in the 3rd round last year, and also for his choking capabilities. This year, however, Alejandro had no real strong standout result, which is why he is at his lowest year-end ranking since 2019. Davidovich Falcao, he looked primed for another solid 2024 though, as he opened the season with a top 10 win over Hubert Hurkacz at the United Cup. However, for much of the year, when Davidovich Falcao came up against a relatively solid opponent, he just could not match them, and he got served quite a bit of routine straight sets losses. His 3-16 record against top 50 players honestly kind of speaks for itself for real. Davidovich Falcao also suffered some close, heartbreaking losses, which could have elevated his season if he came out as the victor. At the DC City Open, he fumbled 5 match points to Flavio Cobolli, who went on to reach the final. The Spaniard did beat Daniil Medvedev in Montreal for his best win of the entire season, but he failed to defend his semifinal points from last year after he missed a great opportunity to close out Matteo Arnaldi in straight sets to make the quarterfinals, but he ultimately fell ill and had to retire in the 3rd set. The Spaniard also suffered from a back injury, which forced him to miss Wimbledon and the Olympics, and that same issue also forced him to cut the cord on his season prematurely at the Paris Masters. I think Davidovich Falcao can return to the top 30 in 2025, and I believe he will. This season was just challenging for him with these tight losses that initiate a negative feedback loop. You know, lower ranking means tougher draws, beating typically earlier losses, and then lowered confidence, and it just repeats. Alejandro did hire fellow Spaniard and former player Fernando Verdasco as his coach in the summertime, which is interesting because Verdasco notoriously had a choking problem himself throughout his career. I will be intrigued for sure to see whether the pair can make progress next season. Kicking off the top 5 is Borna Coric, who went from 37 at the end of 2023 to now number 87 in the world. Borna is one of those players who has a lot of talent, but just has not been able to consistently sustain a high level on the tour, whether it be due to injury or just streaky tennis. The Croatian enjoyed a strong comeback season from shoulder surgery in 2022 when he won his maiden 1000 title in Cincinnati. Coric was the lowest ranked Masters 1000 champion in ATP history at number 152 in the world at the time of his triumph. Borna eventually returned back inside the top 15 in the summer of 2023 thanks to somewhat solid results, but he swiftly exited after failing to defend that Cincinnati Open title. Unfortunately, injury problems resurfaced, which forced the Croatian to shut down his 2023 season rather early. On the bright side, Coric was healthy for most of 2024, but he was unable to make a true mark on the tour. His best result came at the start of the season, where he reached his 9th tour final at Montpellier before losing to Bublik. However, Borna will be disappointed that his struggles at the majors persisted this season. Coric did not make a slam third round still, despite playing all 4 of them. Borna got some pretty tough draws this season though, and unfortunately he just did not win much at all on the main tour. The Croatian was forced to drop down a bit and play a few challenger events, and he wasn't able to walk away with the title on that level either. I think Borna should be, bare minimum, a top 30 mainstay, so it is disappointing that he suffered his worst season on the tour despite being healthy for much of it. 2025, I feel, would be a make or break season for the Croatian, and I hope that he rediscovers his top form because his game is great to watch whenever he's on. He still is 28 years old though, so he has a little bit of time left, but I could low-key see him step away from the sport for good in a few years, to be honest. Mackie McDonald is my number 4 flop on the list, as the American fell 90 spots in the rankings. Mackie is, I guess you can consider him a tour veteran now. He is 29 and he won the national title as a UCLA Bruin in 2016, and after that he turned pro. Mackie has had a few solid standout moments since turning pro 8 years ago, like making the Australian Open 4th round and making his first ATP final at the City Open. Mackie has struggled though with injuries, so that has kept him from reaching the heights that many or some people expected of him. Luckily, the American remained healthy in 2023, which was by far his best career season to date. McDonald scored the biggest win of his career over world number 2 Rafael Nadal, although Rafa was clearly impacted by a hip problem, so that definitely dampened the victory. Later that season, McDonald made his first Masters 1000 quarterfinal in Canada, which shot his ranking up more too. Mackie also fared pretty well actually against top 10 players, holding a positive 4-3 win-loss record against them. In 2024, however, McDonald suffered another injury, which is partly to blame for him not earning a single tour main draw top 50 win. A nagging shoulder problem sidelined McDonald for about 4 months, and he returned to play all of the big North American summer hardcourt tournaments, but he did not make much noise, so unfortunately, his ranking took a hit, and that required him to play challengers during the Asian swing. McDonald had far more success at this level, making 3 consecutive challenger finals in China, and he won one of them in Shenzhen. Those months that McDonald missed were definitely detrimental to him and his ranking, so he got tougher draws and just was not able to build back up as many points. Him going on that run in the challengers to end the season was a good omen and good sign for him, and I am confident that he will be able to return inside the top 100 in 2025 just as long as he remains healthy. Third on the list is Serbia's Laslo Djere, who went from ending 2023 inside the top 35 to currently being ranked 115 in the world. Laslo is not that well known amongst the mainstream tennis world because he hasn't had a really big standout result at the 1000 or slam level. However, he has been pretty consistent at the lower ranks, as he has made an ATP final each season from 2019 to 2023. Djere first got on my radar in 2019 after he won his first title at the Rio 500, where he beat Felix Auger-Aliassime and Dominic Thiem en route. 2019 still remains Djere's best season when he reached his career high of number 27 in the world. 2023, though, was arguably a close second in terms of best seasons. Although Djere didn't win a title last year, he reached another Clay 500, this one in Hamburg, where he ultimately fell to Zverev in the final. Laslo also made his maiden Masters 4th round, and he scored his maiden top 5 win when he ousted Casper Ruud at the ASB Classic in Auckland. Djere was playing excellent tennis at that year's US Open too, and I remember he held a 2-0 lead over compatriot and eventual champion Novak Djokovic in the 3rd round. I was wowed by Laslo's huge heavy ground strokes and him really overpowering the top seed for the first half of the match. Novak said himself afterwards that it was one of the toughest matches that he has played at the Open in years. However, 2024 brought the Serb's worst win percentage season since he turned pro. Injuries were a notable problem for the 29-year-old as he first underwent a minor elbow procedure in April, which sidelined him for nearly 2 months. Laszlo suffered some brutal 5-set first-round losses at Roland Garros and Wimbledon upon his return, but he managed to come out on top and oust Jan-Lennart Struff at the US Open to set up another rematch, a second-round match with Novak Djokovic. Laszlo looked primed to take the second set off Djokovic, but injuries came back to bite yet again when he suffered an abdominal tear and was forced to retire early in the third set. That issue forced Jared to miss the entire Asian swing, but he did well to end his season strong when he made his lone semifinal of 2024 at home in Belgrade, narrowly falling to compatriot Daniil Medvedev. Again, like with many other players on this list, physical problems for sure made this season tougher for Jared. And it's not just the time that these players take off to nurse the injury, which obviously takes a toll on, ranking because they miss tournaments, but these guys were likely dealing with these problems, these little niggles for multiple tournaments, and they just were not able to play at the top level even when they were playing. Now, Chris Eubanks did not have a notable injury issue in 2024. He just failed to live up to his 2023 season standards, which is why he is number 2 on this list. Eubanks dropped from number 34 in the world to now 108. His first big breakthrough moment on the tour really came at the Miami Open, where he came through qualifying before making the quarterfinals, beating the likes of Coric and Manarino. As a result, Chris cracked the top 100 for the very first time, which was very nice and heartwarming because you could see how much it meant for him to finally break through after years of grinding away at it on the Challenger Tour. However, bigger things were in store for Big Banks later that season as he flourished on his favorite surface, the grass. Chris won his maiden tour title at the Mallorca 250, which helped him crack the top 50. Then at SW19, Chris made it all the way to the quarterfinals, knocking out 2 seeds, Cam Norrie and Stefano Tsitsipas, before losing to Medi in the quarterfinals. Chris's Wimbledon run was arguably one of the biggest stories of those championships, as everyone rallied behind Chris, with them knowing that he was the only American male to reach the last 8 in singles. Eubanks low-key became a star after that Wimbledon run as he was featured on GMA and the Today Show. Christopher reached a career high of number 29 in the world soon after, and he was seeded for the first time at a major at the US Open. Eubanks had a low-key end to his 2023 season, finishing it on a 5-match losing streak, and I think some of that had to do with him having to go from typically playing indoor challengers around this stretch in the US to now playing bigger tournaments like the Shanghai and Paris Masters. Now, I want to be clear, Chris didn't play bad at all in 2024 for his standards. In fact, it was his second best year-end rankings finished. However, he simply just did not win as much on the main tour level as he did in 2023, which is why we didn't hear as much from him this year. Eubanks' ranking slipped due to him falling early at Miami, Mallorca, and Wimbledon, which were his 3 biggest events from last year. Chris also opted to play his first full clay swing this year, and clay is definitely his worst surface. He lost all 7 matches played on the red dirt this year, so that definitely did not help his cause. Eubanks did have a couple strong moments on the tour though this year, like when he made the quarterfinals of Winston-Salem and the semifinals of Newport. He also got to play in the Paris Olympics, which was a huge moment for him representing his country on that scale. That being said, it probably would have been a better move career-wise for Eubanks to just skip the Olympics and play Atlanta or even DC instead to maybe build up more points. Chris did find himself solely playing challengers for the latter part of the year, and he did win one of them though in Knoxville earlier this month. Chris will likely be a little bit disappointed that he was not able to finish the year inside the top 100 again, but I don't think he'll be totally upset with this season, I'm sure. To me, and I'm just being brutally honest here, Eubanks was never destined to be a consistent top 30 player. He had a few nice breakout moments last year where he played tremendous tennis, and that was great, but his game is just a little bit too inconsistent for him to sustain a high level and consistently challenge the best of the best. And his tennis, it is very confidence driven too. Chris needs to be on his top level to deliver big results and to have a chance to do so, and that's nearly an impossible ask with how he plays, and to do so day in and day out on the ATP tour. I think some people might have expected more of Eubanks because of how good he looked at Wimbledon, but it possibly was just a lightning in the bottle moment for Big Banks. Don't get me wrong, Eubanks doing his thing was awesome to see, and it was one of the feel-good stories of the year last year, as you had this guy who has been grinding it out for so long on the Challenger Tour finally do it big and go deep at 1000 and a Slam. However, I think Chris's true big calling is sports commentating, as he did an excellent job with ESPN during this year's US Open. He is still 28, so Chris likely has a few good years left in him career-wise, and I definitely want to see Eubanks win, of course. I'm always rooting for him, but I'm not that upset whenever he loses early at a big tournament, because that means that we get to see more of his excellent insights in the commentary booth. And last but not least, we have Frenchman Adrian Mannarino holding the top flop spot. Ranking him number 1 was easy because Mannarino's season was the epitome of flopping badly. He went from having his best career season in 2023 to arguably his worst in 2024. His win-loss percentage was 30% lower this year compared to last year, which is very bad. In 2023, Mannarino, he won 3 titles at the 250 level and was 15-10 against top 50 players, and he got 3 top 10 wins. He also had a few solid runs at the big tournaments. Now, Adrian, he started 2024 very well, in fact, and he made the Australian Open 4th round, which matched his best result at a Slam. He reached his career high of number 17 in the world after Melbourne, but unfortunately, soon after that, everything went to crap for the Frenchman. After he reached the Dallas semifinal, Adrian lost 18 of his next 20 matches, which caused his ranking to slip outside the top 30. Adrian did not do much this season, but he did end it strong with his lone top 15 win of 2024, coming against Tommy Paul en route to the Paris round of 16. While his losing stretch definitely is a bit jarring, I feel like it's not a surprise that Adrian had a decline in the ranks this season. I never really saw him being a consistent top 20 player, not to mention he is extremely streaky. I also believe Mannarino probably lost a little bit of motivation after cracking the top 20 for the first time, because he probably knew that this was his peak and he couldn't get much higher than this, especially with him being 36 years old. He also lost confidence too, probably from that losing streak. Unfortunately for him, I think it is unlikely for him to return inside the top 30 next year, and I wouldn't be surprised if he called it a career very, very soon. That is it for this countdown, and let me know who you believe was the biggest flop or disappointing player of 2024. I was close, by the way, to having Novak Djokovic on the list. I knew that would be controversial though, so I kind of had to think and be like, was Novak really a flop? Objectively, this was one of his more floppier years, as it was kind of his worst year achievement wise, aside from the Olympics, but he did win that Olympic gold medal, which is, arguably the biggest moment of his career, the biggest win of his career. So I felt like it was hard to call him a flop for winning that after he won that title. Also, who do you believe has the best shot of the players I mentioned here on this list at turning things around next year? Again, let me know your thoughts in the comments, and make sure you subscribe too so you're notified whenever I post my most improved players video next. Thank you all so much for watching and for your continued support, and I'll see you all next time here on Christian's Court.